Hey, it's family-friendly Jaeru here and welcome to Character Analysis, a video series where I will analyze characters from series for which I won't make fully-fledged reviews or analysis videos on. And what a better way to start the show than by exploring one of the most debated anime protagonists of all time, Light Yagami from Death Note. To make this video completely clear, I will use material from Death Note's anime adaptation as well as the manga's first 50 chapters and the final chapter to analyze Light's character. So this means I'm excluding L Change the World or any other non-canon spin-off like stage plays, Japanese Death Note movies, and especially the Netflix adaptation. That being said, I will obviously spoil everything I end up covering, so watch the show or read the manga first if you don't want to get spoiled. Also, to be clear, I will use any dates that are established in the manga as it is the source material. Alright, let's get started. At the start of Death Note, Light Yagami is a third-year high school student at a Daikoku private academy. He was born on February 28 in 1986 as the first child of his parents, Soichiro Yagami and Sachiko Yagami. Light is a person who could be regarded as an almost perfect individual. He is hardworking, talented in practically every field, and also considered good-looking by many. It may not come as a surprise to anyone that he is popular among all of his peers. And no wonder, he is top of his class. But due to his skills, he regularly hears praise from his classmates and family, which has inflated his ego. This has built up immense arrogance inside of him, which could turn out vital for his downfall later on. When Light was only 13 to 14 years old, he won the National Junior High School Tennis Tournament 2 years in a row. And despite his obvious potential, he decided to retire from the sport as he had locked in his future in advance. He was going to follow his father's footsteps and join the NPA, National Police Agency. Light had previously assisted Japanese police with his brilliant deduction skills and thus is already an established figure in the NPA. Speaking of his deductive skills, considering that at the start of the series Light is only around 18 years old, his ability to plan out any situation and see through any scenario is absolutely remarkable. This is wonderfully highlighted when Light ultimately gives away his Death Note and devises a long-term master plan to recover the Death Note while drawing all suspicion away from himself and Misa Amane, while also mapping out a perfect opportunity to dispose L. But despite having an ideal future, Light isn't satisfied with his life. In fact, you could even say he is bored. See, like his father, Light is fervently passionate about justice. He deeply cares about his family, wants to help the world to become a better place by becoming a police officer, and he's also someone who doesn't even want to consider killing anyone. As ironic as it sounds, Light states his distaste for killing anyone when he loses his memories of the Death Note and shows a severe disturbance when seeing someone he wrote in the Death Note die in front of him. However, at the same time, Light is bored of life on Earth, as in his point of view, the world around him is rotten. He is disgusted by the crime he has to see on a daily basis. Why though? Well, Light obtained his Death Note in 2003, which is 1 year after Japan's all-time highest crime year of 3.69 million registered crimes in 2002. 3.69 million crimes a year equates to around 10,000 crimes committed each day, which is an absurd number considering how back in 2002 Japan had a population of 127 million people. Of course, these numbers only include cases where the perpetrator got caught, so the actual crime rate could be even larger. But this is a good reference of Japan's everyday life situation at the time. It is quite reasonable to assume that in Light's view, crimes are happening all around him, and anyone with twisted desires could be a potential criminal, possibly even the very person sitting right next to you on the train. So, as a so-called righteous man, Light yearns to purge the world of all evil and make it an utopia free from bloodshed, crimes, conflicts, or wars. And in that type of world, a righteous person would serve as the god of Earth, who punishes those who are guilty to their ultimate punishment, death. But how is that a realistic thought in any way? Light's boredom drives him to grab the note of death. He initially displays blatant disbelief in the Death Note. Simply put, it seems too good, or perhaps too bad, to be real. Sure, this notebook fell supernaturally from the sky, but there can't possibly be a notebook that can straight up kill people, right? But what if it did exist? Perhaps Light was purposely chosen as the ideal subject to rid the world of its crimes because he's the only person who's talented, self-confident, and ruthless enough to do the job. Of course, we know this isn't true, as Ryuk had out of boredom dropped the notebook into the human realm, and it just happened to drop where Light happened to see it. After trying out the notebook for the first few times and finding out that it does indeed have the power he desires, Light, in his delusions, begins to believe that he is in fact that guy. In his eyes, criminals that have committed terrible, heinous acts do not deserve to live, as the society should only reward hardworking, law-obedient people like himself, which is kinda ironic considering how he is quite literally killing people, but I suppose writing their names on a note that causes his victims to have heart attacks is different from directly killing them. However, I guess Light's twisted perspective on what is righteous is precisely why he is a fantastic "he just like me for real" character that many look up to. Highly deemed social status of Light is essentially desirable by almost anyone. Yes, even by introverted people to some extent. Light is destined to succeed in life due to his skills and connections, and could probably even get into any human relationship he wants. But while he is alone, he tries his best to solve problems with society using methods he and probably many others consider completely ethical for a reason or another. And well, I guess there is another relatable aspect of him, which makes him such a memeable person.
Wait, that's nothing!
If we were to ignore that, Light is an admirable person. I mean, who wouldn't aspire to be such a person? This kind of mentality is expanded later on in the series when Light sends his Death Note to ex-Kira, Teru Mikami. Teru Mikami was someone who had turned into a criminal prosecutor in his ambition to erase freedom from his enemies, evil people. At a young age, he had developed one-dimensional look on people, where he categorized people as either good or evil. This line of reasoning expanded once he began defending his classmates from bullies and even started getting bullied himself. Then 4 of his bullies died alongside Mikami's own mother in a car accident. However, Mikami didn't mourn his mother for long, as he considered those bullies' death more beneficial to the society in a long run compared to his mother's death. This is also why Mikami admires Kira so much, as from his perspective, Kira punishes those who deserve to get punished, evil people, by that, and one could say, does God's work. In other words, a person like Mikami was destined to become a Kira worshipper in a world where Kira's judgment is the law. If you were to compare Mikami to people in real life, I could easily see someone with a similar life experience to consider Kira's actions as justified, godlike even. Especially during a time in Japan where crimes were a commonplace. But even in a world as dark as ours, where street violence is constantly growing, people get exceedingly irritated at the government's and police's lack of involvement. Not to mention that our world is constantly becoming more depressing day by day, where anyone, even the richest person on earth, could get as bored at how rotten it is. It becomes extremely easy to relate with Light, and even consider doing the very same thing he does in a series if Death Note were to actually exist. That being said, this sort of thinking is rather shallow, considering what type of person Light Yagami really is. There are many people that state that Light was corrupted by the Death Note and became a completely different person as a result. This idea is even supported in the series itself, where Light loses all of his memories of the Death Note and becomes his former self, someone who wouldn't kill or manipulate people under any circumstance, until he regains his memories and becomes Kira, the master of Ryuk's Death Note, once more. And I do agree, Light ultimately became corrupted and became a completely different person altogether. But there was no magical corruption going on. Rather, what actually corrupted Light was the power that a Death Note contains, not the Death Note itself. To any regular bystander, Death Note might appear as a regular notebook with an edgy name attached to it. In the end, even with all of its rules, it is a notebook that has a power to kill any person on Earth, anywhere, at any time. Difference is that Light is probably one of the only people on the planet who is crazy enough to go on such killing sprees as he does, and is also skilled enough to not get caught by the general public for his actions. Or, at least, that was until Light made a severe and continuous lapse in his judgment. You remember when I mentioned Light's arrogance earlier on? Well, since Death Note provides Light a swift way of killing anyone with no trace of evidence, Kira is essentially an invincible figure who cannot be caught by your regular law enforcement. Especially since, as far as we know, Kira was also killing criminals outside of Japan. That is, until his passion drove him to transgress his own morals. See, thus far, Light had held onto his morals. He only kills convicted, serious criminals, not petty thieves or people that aren't fully convicted of their crimes. Though at first, Light only kills convicted, bad criminals. His original plan was to kill every bad person from the planet, but that would wait. And if you're wondering if this is just speculation, this is what Light said in the first episode.
And while the truly guilty ones who deserve to be punished for their crimes die of heart attacks, the people who are less guilty but who still make trouble for others will slowly be erased through disease and accidental death. Then, and only then, the world will start moving in the right direction.
But when Light comes across a new mysterious figure, L, who has a reputation of solving any crimes they put their hands on, Light snaps. Sure, us viewers know in hindsight that L is a morally grey figure who is ready to even sacrifice human life for his righteous victory, and therefore could potentially fit into Light's list of people he dislikes. But keep in mind, Light at this point has no idea of this. He is also completely unaware that Lind L. Taylor is actually a convicted criminal who was sentenced to die within a day. All he thought was that this man right in front of him is someone who just declared Kira to be evil. This declaration directly conflicts with Light's way of thinking, and it also threatens Kira's existence, or more precisely, Light Yagami's freedom to act as Kira. This is the first time when Light lost control of his calm and collective persona and allowed his emotions to overwhelm him. And while I could go on to debate how Light lost a second he allowed L to win their first encounter, in a grand scheme of things, it does not matter as much, since this exact plot twist allowed so many of the series' iconic moments like potato chips scene and the tennis match to happen. But rather, I want to emphasize how this was the point at which Light actually started to get corrupted by the Death Note. Yeah, he had already gone psycho mode by becoming a quite literal serial killer, and he didn't even care once a Shinigami told him that he won't be able to ascend to heaven or hell upon death. Even then, he stuck to his own morals and his own distorted look on justice till this very moment. But now, he had just killed someone who wasn't actually a criminal. Ironically, Light did kill an actual criminal, but he allowed his emotions to take over his look on justice and intended to kill an innocent person. And ladies and gentlemen, this is when Light started to change. To Light, everyone who now opposed Kira were evil, as they were, against Light's true justice. Kira is good, and L is evil. Therefore, Light actually delved into a similar childish outlook on life as Mikami had done throughout his entire life. In reality, concepts such as good and evil are so vague and don't hold much weight, since anyone could be considered good and evil by different people. There is no such person who is truly only good or evil, just like Death Note demonstrates. Some people who are considered good by wide audiences could end up doing evil things, even if unknowingly. For example, Light's father, someone who cares strongly about justice, ended up working with the devil himself and played to his pockets multiple times. Does this make Soichiro Yagami evil? Absolutely not, as he intended to fight for good. I mean, this man literally said he would murder his own son and then himself if Light ended up being Kira. Doesn't matter how you looked into this, it is still admirable. After all, he did grow Light into the person he is. But you could even compare the good and evil type of childish thinking to real life. For example, any of you all who possibly got bullied in a school, it is easy to call your school bullies as ultimate bad guys, the prime definition of evil. But what if you were also that type of person who requested a homeroom teacher to check your homework if they had forgotten to do so? Then, to your bullies and maybe even other classmates, you seemed like the true evil who only acted to make others' day worse. This example is by no means supposed to glorify bullies or bullying itself in any way. I know that bullying is incusable and so is murder. Besides, that doesn't mean that a victim of bullying was evil in any way. But even then, in my opinion, it is important to analyze things from others' point of view, even if that person was your worst enemy. But obviously, morally the bullies are the evil here. Right. But similarly, Light is still morally the true evil here by murdering people left and right. And not only that, he's ironically committing crimes himself. And now since Light also murdered, in theory, an innocent person, he also has no defense in his argument of cleansing the world from dangerous criminals, as he has become the very criminal he despised so much of. Yet, he doesn't think of himself as such, and while becoming more and more remorseless throughout the series, he still considers his actions as the ultimate righteous sacrifice to keep the world a better place. Could someone with such glorious ambitions really be called good like Light thinks? Definitely not. His dream of an utopian world isn't purely evil either, even if it means that a dictator is ruling it, but he is still convincing himself that murder is somehow for the greater good. This creates a convoluted look on Light's character, where no one person could properly describe if what Light is doing is actually right. That is because humans cannot be categorized as just good or evil. Besides, this wakes up another discussion on whether death penalty is truly righteous or even ideal punishment system in the first place. As first of all, there is always chance for a proper rehabilitation of a former criminal, and secondly, if a criminal was killed off, like how Light does it in the Death Note, do those criminals actually pay the price of their actions to the society? That's a really good question, right? After all, you could see death penalty as an easy way out of your actions, but since this is a topic for a whole different debate, I digress. Since Light doesn't get punished for his crimes he commits, Light proceedingly becomes a more and more ruthless person than before. At first, it is clear that Light feels guilty about his first two killings. After all, he didn't believe that Death Note would actually work as intended. But upon realizing that his first murder was just done on so-called worthless piece of shit criminal, he starts justifying his actions more and more. As Kira's fame grows, Light becomes more and more convinced that he is doing the right thing and is ready to eliminate any opposition he has. He showcases his amazing skills in manipulating people while staying in the shadows by killing FBI agent Ray Pember and manipulating Pember to murder other FBI agents residing in Japan for Kira. After this, he perfectly manipulates Pember's fiancée, Naomi Mizora, to leak her identity so that he can write her name on the Death Note. In addition, Light maintained Misa in check by promising hopeless promises towards her, since Light wasn't just able to dispose her. Misa's one-sided love of Light is tragic in its own right, as Light at no point has any interest towards her and in fact seems to severely dislike her. What is interesting, however, is that while Light still has no interest towards Misa romantically after both of them lose their memories of the Death Note, Light seems to genuinely care for Misa in a protective way and cannot imagine manipulating her in any sense of a way. But as Light's memories return, he only uses Misa as a pawn, since her willingness to help Light to ridiculous lengths could turn out useful for him, which it did and didn't in the same time. With this information, you could even argue that Light had awoken his sociopathic tendencies that he had buried inside of him, in order to gain a net positive from every situation. It would be too easy for me to label Light as a sociopath. After all, his behavior in Death Note is peak sociopath behavior, and his actions toward Misa just confirm it. However, it is also very clear that being such a sociopath isn't Light's true personality, but just part of Light's corrupted personality that was born after Light's turn into corruption had begun. Later on though, it is somewhat clear that Light's and Misa's relationship was abusive, which signals how deeply corrupted Light had become, to even treat women like shit. And because at no point does Light feel guilty about crimes and other bad things he does, he thinks that he is at all times doing the right thing. And Light kinda has a point. After all, Kira actually lowered the amount of crimes committed, which reasonably hired Light's confidence that his justice is actually the correct one. However, even if the crime rates actually lowered, that doesn't mean that what Light did is actually justifiable. By starting to commit such actions that he wouldn't normally do, Light is slowly but surely becoming more corrupted by his inner desires to murder anyone from his path, which ultimately twists his own sense of justice. Because he is so clear about his justice, he sometimes slips up even while talking to L, as he has a hard time not thinking like Kira. For example, Light somehow knows that Ray Bamba was the FBI agent following him, despite L never stating so. In other words, Light knows little too much about Kira, and has a hard time distancing his life as Light Yagami from his life as Kira. However, when he loses his memories of being Kira, while he can deduce that third Kira is a member of Yotsuba group, he acts as a completely different person, which L takes note of right away. But there is also another side to Light's character. As I mentioned before, by getting corrupted by his own desires, Light becomes quite emotional compared to his normal calm and collective personality. One could say he's acting quite childish in a way. To determine what exactly is being childish, as of course any adult or adults alike are free to express their emotions how they please, we have to determine Kira's behavior. By murdering Lindell Taylor on live TV, Light not only loses his so-called innocence, but he also proves to the world that Kira tries to win, no matter the cost. See, regardless of how skilled you are at certain things, let it be playing an instrument or a sport, sometimes you will lose to someone who is more talented than you. We have all been in a situation before where someone outscores us and there isn't much you can do about it other than accept your loss, cope with it, and use it as motivation to improve at your craft. Or at least that's what a mature adult would do. However, for humans, it is rather normal to lose common sense to hatred crawling inside them. In reality, if you can't accept that losing is part of life, you will never grow as a person, or more importantly, never grow up from being a child. Yes, you may take victories at times, but you will never fundamentally grow as a person. And this is exactly where Light made his biggest mistake in the whole of Death Note. He never grew up as a person. And despite eventually beating L in their 1v1 playground match, he couldn't mature enough to later on beat Mello and Nier at the same competition. Light is a sore loser and hates losing over anything else. This is evident to the viewer when Light later on throws a tantrum over L, revealing his identity to him in a way which would throw the blame directly at Light if L or the pop idol Hideki Ruga were to die. Not only that, when Kira murders Lindell Taylor and then continuously taunts L with cryptic messages, it is clear that Kira is trying to toy with L like an immature child would. And since Light emotionally cannot comprehend the fact that L outsmarted him, this makes him even more obsessed with his objective of killing L. This is to the point that he forgets his main objective, which was to become the god of Earth. So when he later loses another Death Note to Mello, Light, who always loved his family and even proclaimed that he would kill Kira, does himself with his own hands. If Kira directly or indirectly caused his father's death, cares more about his own status as Kira than his dying father. This is where you can ultimately picture Light's final downfall to full-on corruption and a point of no return. After losing any chance of redemption, Light becomes someone with a complete lack of remorse. He doesn't even hesitate to sacrifice Kiyomi Takada, a person who loved him and was completely wrapped around his finger. His only objective had become getting rid of Mello and Nier, which perfectly reflects his previous objective of chasing L. Nothing else mattered. But since he no longer had to prove his innocence to yes-men following him at all times, he became less cautious and performed mistakes on a regular basis, which conflicted with his former perfect alibi, which ended up being debunked and shattered. And by trusting a person as childish as he was, he met his final demise. During his final moments, Light demonstrates how broken of a man he had become. Although one might make the case that Light had already lost it prior to this moment, being discovered by Nier was just the final straw. This was the moment he snapped completely and became broken of a man. He had reached the verge of complete psychosis. Light Yagami had disappeared and only Kira was left, a being that had corrupted a man once so kind and hardworking. By straying from his initial morals and justice, he had made himself public enemy number 1, the most worthless person in that gloomy warehouse. By breaking everyone's trust and having no friends left, there was no way he could manipulate himself away from the situation. Instead, he pleads mercy from the very god he obtained his godlike powers from. But this time, there was no way out. Standing all alone, Light had come across the very thing he feared the most: death. This time, he fully deserved it. After all, Kira had lost the game. Thanks for watching and listening. But the real question is, why are both Light and L holding their tennis racket two-handed? Like seriously, we all know you cannot hit a proper topspin with that.